Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm here with Andrii Telizhenko, and he is a former political advisor and a former diplomat with Ukraine. We got some questions for him, and he knows a lot about the situation. Let's talk. Hello, Andrii. Great talking to you
Hi,
again.
everybody.
Haven't talked with you for several years since I was with Fault Lines a few years ago. But at any rate, so let's get right to it. Plenty to talk about. I understand that you, in fact, when you were in Ukraine, one of the things that you did is you worked with the prosecutor general, and you know a lot about the Burisma scandal. Maybe you could fill us in on some of the things that you think we would find interesting that you know positively, witnessed yourself, saw evidence of.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. Gerald, it's perfect to have me back. Yeah, I was working as advisor to the prosecutor generals of Ukraine, two prosecutor generals, one Burisma after the coup in Ukraine, and then the other one was Mr. Shokin, who got fired by Biden because he was prosecuting the Burisma case and Hunter Biden directly. I was also a witness in the Senate Homeland Security and Finance Committee's investigation in 2020 on Hunter Biden, and was out of 87 pages, 29 pages are about my testimony and my information that I provided to the Senate, I could provide it to the Senate at that time. Basically, Ukraine was used. Ukraine was used throughout these years by the West, by the United States. That's directly, I can tell you that because I worked directly with the U.S. Embassy. I was their guy on the ground. I was in the White House numerous times officially, and that's also in the Senate report. And I can tell you that it was total corruption by not only the Bidens, but the deep state, the whole deep state, and the Bidens and Obama were covering it up. They knew what was going on. And how it all happened, there were 6 criminal cases on Burisma. It's not that there were no cases at all. Like the media is saying, there were 6 criminal cases happening, and 4 were opened in 14-15, and then 2 more opened by Shokin. And when the liberal media tells you that nothing happened, Shokin was fired because he didn't do a good job, he opened 2 more cases, additional cases, into Burisma and Zlochevsky. The one who closed those cases was Lutsenko when he came after being politically appointed by Biden and Poroshenko to cover up the Hunter Biden and Burisma story. So we were looking into this. We were looking far deep into Zlochevsky, how he gained his certificates for gas development. Because Zlochevsky was a former minister in the Ukrainian government of ecology. He signed off for his own company to produce the certificates for producing gas in Ukraine. Dozens of those certificates which were put into one of the criminal cases. And we were looking into them. So the company itself, the formation of the company was illegal. It was corrupt, and everybody knew about who Burisma and who Zlochevsky was, even though Hunter Biden joined that board of directors. And I can also tell you that not only I worked in the prosecutor's office and being a diplomat, I was also got a job offering, and I worked for Blue Star Strategies, a company, the middleman between Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Burisma. I was their guy on the ground in Ukraine after I left my position in the government and worked there for a year. And I can tell you what the Senate report doesn't have a lot because they could not subpoena me because of Romney. Senator Romney blocked my subpoena in Congress in 2020. So I could not provide information on Burisma and on Blue Star, the one that had under non-disclosure agreement. And that stuff is the most juicy part, which the U.S. needs to know about. Now I can talk about it. I got sanctioned by the U.S. government illegally. They put me as a Russian spy in 2021 and named me the Treasury Department. The Ukrainian government sanctioned me, so I can tell you, I can talk about whatever happened before without any subpoenas or non-disclosure agreements. So they were the middleman, Blue Star. They knew what was happening. They got Hunter Biden on the board of directors of Burisma. They had a couple of reports for Joe Biden, one legit, one unlegit, like the mafia has legit book, unlegit book. One, the legit one, was openly showing that Burisma was a good company to the public, that there were some problems that can be covered up with PR help from Blue Star Strategies. The other unlegit showed the real one. What happened? Who was Burisma? Who was Luchevsky? What were they doing? And I know this from Sally Painter and Karen Tramontano, the founders of Blue Star Strategies. They told me this directly, how they handled it and how they showed this to Joe Biden himself. So when Hunter Biden was joining Burisma in 14-15, he knew exactly where he was heading into, and they knew exactly what problems they're going to have to fight the corruption and to help cover up the corruption of this company for the money of the oligarchs, Luchevsky, who was the head of that company. And the prosecutor's office investigated that, and that's why Shokin, the prosecutor, got fired by the vice president of the United States, of a foreign country, coming to my country, Ukraine, interfering and influencing in the government work, which was done throughout those last 9 years.
Let me ask you this, because one of the things that we've heard basically is that Joe Biden was, in the colonial days, the England would call him a governor of the basically of one of their colonies or territories. That basically Joe Biden, after the United States, was involved in the Maidan coup, basically, installed a new government, that Joe Biden was basically running the country or in charge of the country or the ultimate authority in charge of Ukraine. Was that what you saw? Was that your opinion?
Oh, yeah. Joe Biden was the big guy for Ukraine. That's what you can call him. And it all went through the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. As I said, I was the go-to-go guy between all that process. After the coup, after Maidan, which unfortunately I was part of, I was a young guy. I was right in the middle of that whole process during the Maidan. The Newland cookies, that was my idea, unfortunately. I should have she wanted to give out bread. I said, let's go out with cookies, could be a better PR move. So that's how the cookies thing came up. It was my idea in the Hyatt in Kyiv in December. We met with her, and that's how it happened. So the U.S. government was fully controlling the Ukraine from bottom to the top, from middle government officials to high-ranking government officials, like the president of Ukraine would call and talk to Joe Biden and deal with things. And they would have lobbyists, they would have other procedures to go through. But if you have a contact to the vice president of the United States at that time, you would be God in Ukraine. That's how it worked. Unfortunately, for my country, it's hard to say for me, but I was also advisor to the first Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, who oversaw intelligence. We met with CIA Director Brennan. How the meeting with Brennan happened, just an example of how unsovereign Ukraine was. Because I was trusted by the U.S. government, the deep state at that time, by the Obama administration, they would tell me who my boss would meet, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. It's like the second person or third person in the country. But he did not know who the meetings he would meet with. Most of the meetings with the U.S. were brought in, like CIA Director Brennan. He would not know who he'd meet. I would know, but I would not be able to tell him because the U.S. Embassy told me not to do that. If I would, then they would fire me. And because this is just a small example, but then in the meetings, they would tell us what to do, who to hire, who to fire, who to starting from the U.S. ambassador in Kyiv. She would come up and tell, oh, you have to fire so many people in the prosecutor's office or in the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine or in such body of the office, or you should reform this body by firing or hiring these people. And they should tell exactly who these people should be, from the Soros organizations, the Renaissance organizations, from different pro-Western, so-called pro-Western, pro-liberal bodies, which had no clue where they were going, no government experience at all. And they would come in and they would be as corrupt as anybody else in the government, but they would be their people, like my son of a bitch, sorry for my language, but that's how it worked. They would fire people who they did not trust or didn't have control over and hire people who they had control over. They would do the same thing, but they would have not only corrupt, but they had no knowledge of government, forming the government. And this is what happened in the prosecutor's case when Shokin got fired and they hired Lutsenko, a person with no law degree at all.
Right, that's my understanding, that a lot of people don't understand, and that is that when Joe Biden had Shokin fired, who was the prosecutor general, the same as our attorney general, that the Ukrainian, I think it's called the Rada, basically their Congress, their parliament, had to change the rules because the guy that they brought in to be the new general, the new, basically our attorney general, the same thing, prosecutor general, was not an attorney. So he didn't know how to do that job. So if he was not an attorney, it sounds to me that he was just put there to do what he was told.
And he did. He closed the Burisma cases one by one, and the head of the Burisma company, Zlochevsky, paid around $200,000 fine. That's it, for 6 criminal cases, officially to the Ukrainian budget. And that's what happened even less than a year after Lutsenko became the prosecutor. They changed the law. That was right.
Now, at that time, were you working as an assistant to the prosecutor's advisor to the prosecutor's office, or was that when you were the advisor to, I believe, the deputy? Was it the deputy?
No, and I was already at that time. I finished my job as a diplomat. I resigned from my post in Washington, and I joined Blue Star Strategies. I was the one who organized the meeting with Karen Tramontano, Sally Painter from Blue Star Strategies.
And Blue Star Strategies was one of Hunter Biden's companies, right?
It's not the Hunter Biden company. It's a company of the deep state. Karen Tramontano and Sally Painter are former advisors to Bill Clinton. They had way back to the 90s, to the Hillary, Bill Clinton, all that clan. And Sally was the advisor to the President of the United States. And Karen Tramontano was the chief of staff to Bill Clinton at one point. And she was working in the White House. And so there are the company, not just working for Hunter Biden or Hunter Biden's company. They are the deep state company, which helped cover up and advise to Joe Biden through Amos Hochstein.
I know who Amos. You know what's interesting? I have reported on Amos Hochstein, and I know who he is well. I know that I've written articles on Amos Hochstein because Joe Biden hired. What's interesting about Amos Hochstein is Joe Biden brought him in prior to the Ukraine conflict to stop the Nord Stream pipeline. That's why he was supposedly some kind of a gas expert, and Joe Biden brought him in, and his job was to stop Germany from moving forward with Nord Stream 2. And I quickly found out that he did the same thing as Hunter Biden, that he went on the board of Naftogaz.
There you go. He did. He was working for the Ukrainian gas company and getting paid a lot of money from there, because the average salary from being the board members of the Naftogaz is more than $100,000 per month. And that's when the Ukrainian average salary is $200 per month for a person. So that's how these people worked. But Amos was Blue Star, Amos Hochstein, they were the middleman between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And they were the ones between Burisma owner Zlochevsky and Joe Biden, the big guy. They would be explaining how to do business for Joe Biden. That's how they worked.
So then it sounds to me like what you're saying is that this Hunter Biden situation was not just family corruption, that there was deep state involvement in it.
Of course. Of course, it was not only family corruption of the vice president of the United States, which was using Ukraine as a rag to do dirty business. That's why we have a war today, because these people brought Ukraine to a situation where it was used in any way possible for the deep state of the United States elites and for the clan of Biden's and people from like Hillary Clinton's circle. So that's how it all happened.
Now, let me ask you this. Our guy, Zelensky, I do know he was an actor. I do know that he had that TV show, and then they started a party with the same name as the TV show, and then in the TV show he was just an average person that became a politician and wanted to, basically the TV show was what he was eventually doing as president. Your thoughts on Zelensky, on his history, on where he fits in here?
Yeah, Zelensky, he comes out of basically nowhere at one point. We have this whole process with Shokin, with Poroshenko, and then you have the election process where people in Ukraine are not happy with what's happening in Ukraine. The corruption, the foreign interference. After 2014, Ukraine was 80% foreign influence, United States influence, like this. Like you had the phone number to Joe Biden, you're a god. You have the phone number to the U.S. ambassador. You're everything. You can get a job anywhere you want. So that's how it worked, unfortunately. And not only that, nothing was built. Ukraine, within the 9 years, not even a subway station in the capital city with $1 billion budget before the war. Nothing was built. That's the problem. It was all falling apart. The country was falling apart. The roads were not being done. Everything was getting worse, inflation, etc. So you have the elections, and this guy out of nowhere comes out, Zelensky. I got a call around February. He was already known at that time that he's going to go for the presidency, and said, you should support this guy, help him get elected, because I was working with some people from Ukrainian business elite side, consulting them on politics, and they said, we want you to help us work with Zelensky. And we did. I did meet him a couple of times, but not more than that. And I didn't trust him, because how can a clown, an actor, be the president of a country like Ukraine, the second former most strongest country in the Soviet Union? And yeah, it's falling apart, but that's still not the case to destroy it further. I was told he's going to hire half professionals or 70% professionals, and then everything else he's going to hire people from his own team. So you're going to have a professional government. Doesn't matter who you work for. You're going to go which we would hire and get things done. And the country's going to start rolling. And he promised peace. So I said, okay, if that's the case, I'm going to also support this guy. So that's why he got 73% of the votes, because people wanted peace. People did not want war with Russia. People did not want war with anybody, any other country, nor Russia, nor Belarus, nor Georgia, nobody. People just want to have peace. That's why he promised. He came as a peacemaker. And the outcome today, you see war. So he got brought in by Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky, everybody knows that. Unfortunately, at that time, he had also problems with the United States. And he had problems from the outside, which he had to flee from Israel. And he's an old Ukrainian oligarch who financed Zelensky, like from top to bottom. And then at one point in 2018, right after the presidential election, 3 months later, Zelensky gets bought off by this guy, Pinchuk. He's a business partner of Soros. He comes into Kolomoisky, says, I will make a deal. I'll help you get off your problems. You're going to have sanctions, but you can be able to get your money. You can work your life in Ukraine. Just don't go out. I'll help you do your business. And that's how it all happened. Zelensky got bought off by Pinchuk. Pinchuk brought him to London, to the intelligence, British intelligence. They spoke there, and that's how Zelensky agreed to a war. The war was being planned 2 years before it started. Not only by as we see Russia, people say, Russia. It was all being planted from 2014, and 2 years prior, people knew that it's going to be a war, because they already were making money of building roads. As Zelensky started doing that, but just ripping off the budget, not building anything, knowing that there's going to be total destruction, and making money out of this, billions of dollars of road buildings all over Ukraine in the last 2 years before it started. And he knew that it's going to be a war, because they agreed that they're going to fight until the last Ukrainian, because there's going to be money involved, and he's going to be a billionaire. Zelensky today is a multi-billionaire. From an actor, he became a multi-billionaire clown with blood on his hands.
Let me ask you this. With what's going on now, one of the things that I wondered, I have a friend who, they're Russian, but they've got family members all over Ukraine, from the former Soviet Union. They've moved all over. Okay. And they've said basically to me that, their family members say to them, we want peace. We just want the war to end. We don't even care how. We don't love the Russians, hate the Russians. We just want the war to end, and we want to go back to our lives. These massive amounts of people, the unbelievable numbers of young Ukrainians, it's like a genocide. They're just throwing these young Ukrainian men into the minefields or whatever. What's going on there in Ukraine? Is there any pushback? Are the people able to say anything? Are the people upset about it? Are the people supporting this? Your thoughts?
I can tell you exactly what's happening. People are afraid to speak out. Personally, like me, for the last 3 years before the war, after I got sanctioned by the U.S. Illegally, falsely, after I got sanctioned by Zelensky sanctioned me as a Ukrainian official illegally, because he cannot sanction your own citizens. I'm suing him in the Supreme Court of Ukraine. And he went after people like me who were on TV speaking for peace. I was just talking to him. We should go with the Minsk agreements. We should support those Minsk agreements. We should get back our territory like Donbass as an autonomy. It's good. it's already a start. Then we can move from there on negotiations. What can we do and how to develop our country, get back our connections with Russia, Belarus, because that's where the money was. The Ukraine was making all the money in the post-Soviet bloc. The Western countries never bought anything from Ukraine. They did buy, but very cheap, our trees, our grain, everything, the wood, they were exported on very low prices, and Ukraine was not making money. Businessmen were making money, but not the country. Everything was falling apart. We could produce spaceships before. Now we cannot do anything, and people like me, they start to block, and I had to flee Ukraine in right the first month of the war, not because of the Russian in Ukraine, but because Zelensky and his government were going after me, and I was put on a kill list, Mirotvorets. In Ukraine, I was being threatened on TV. I have screenshots from television that being threats to kill me. I was threatened by former Ukrainian government officials, members of parliament, that they're going to kill me, putting my name on the streets where I live, so they would shoot me right away and my family, just because I wanted peace. And so I had 3 friends who got shot by the security service of Ukraine. One of them, one friend who got kidnapped by the security service of Ukraine, got beaten for a week until he, with the gun pointing to his head, did not say what they wanted to say for him on TV. He was just a political expert. It's not some businessman, oligarch. It was just a normal political expert who was not even rich. It was just normal guys in Ukraine who wanted also peace. They did not want war. They got killed. And that's why people are afraid to speak up. The West doesn't talk about this. I went through this myself. I had to flee the country, hiding up for a month in Western Ukraine, and then going out and from Ukraine and leaving it because my life was in danger because of the Ukrainian government. They would kill me.
Wow.
And they would kill me today if I come back. And because I don't want war, and people are afraid to speak up. So there's a lot of people who want peace. A lot of people who don't want this war to continue. Yeah, there may be 30%, 25% under propaganda who want war, fighting to the last Ukrainian. But a lot of other Ukrainians want peace. As you say, we don't care Russia, Ukraine. We just want the war to end. We want to live our normal lives because people are losing their jobs, their economy, etc. is going down. It's all being supported by the West. But people want their lives back. People want to negotiate to save what is left to save of Ukraine. That is the big question. We could have saved Ukraine last year in Istanbul if we were to support those peace agreements which Ukraine signed and then left them after Boris Johnson came and spoke to Zelensky and said, oh, Washington and London doesn't support those peace deals. So this is what Ukrainians are talking about. We should say what is left to be saved of Ukraine, have a neutral country. We don't want to fight wars with anybody else, and live our lives back together, get our lives back together from what we can start. And have it be no NATO, no any other alliance, just Ukraine be as it was peaceful before. Ukrainians are peaceful. In the last 9 years, Ukraine became something which I never saw in my country. I lived in the US. I not only worked there, but I lived there for 10 years in Canada, United States. I came back to Ukraine in 2010. I didn't want to live in the States. I came back to live in my country, to do something good for my country. And what Ukraine became from one, even I came back 20 years ago to now, a lot of people who hate you, a lot of people of hatred. It's Nazism. Propaganda of Nazism in Ukraine became so much. It's not, people don't go on the streets and say Zikai or whatever. No, they just say Ukrainians are better than anybody else. We should kill anybody else who thinks that Ukrainians are worse or the same. That is Nazism. That's National Socialism. So basically, that's what is being put onto Ukrainian minds in the last 9 years, and people are afraid to speak up because your neighbor can go to the government and tell, oh, somebody's trying to talk about peace, and then the security service is going to come to your house, kidnap you. Nobody knows where you are, and there's thousands of cases like this which nobody talks about in Ukraine. And I don't know why they're still being not talked about, where we can mention this, that this is being done by the so-called government of Zelensky, the regime of Zelensky, the Nazi regime, which is being financed by the US government. And this has to stop. I don't want my country to be developed like this. I want a normal Ukraine. I want my life back, and I want to live a peaceful life with Russia, Belarus, Hungary, United States, China, whatever, and get our lives back together.
At what point did you come to realize that the U.S. had basically overthrown Ukraine so that they could use Ukraine in a war with Russia. At what point did you start to say, oh my gosh, this is real, there's going to be a war with Russia? And of course, Russia being a superpower, anyone with a sense would know that no country in the world, no, Ukraine being a smaller country, it's got what, 30, 40 million people, to go to war with a superpower is suicide. Anybody would know that. At what point did you realize they are very serious here and they're going to start a war and Ukraine is going to get destroyed?
I saw this in 2016, 15 basically.
Really?
When I was working,
back?
I was working in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington. That's when the DNC Ukraine collusion. I was the one who talked about it in political first time when it happened. That's when we met on fault lines.
Yes.
With you, I was on air, and that's when I understood that something wrong is happening. When I came back to Ukraine, I was still in good connections with the U.S. embassy, the U.S. government. Like I could arrange a meeting at the White House very easily with people who I worked with from the Ukrainian side, and we would go do official meeting in the White House. And that's how in-depth good connections I was. My visa, U.S. visa, would be done in 20 minutes if needed. That's how in good connections I was. And I started understanding that something's wrong here. Our government is falling apart. Our police is falling apart. Our prosecutor's office is falling apart. I saw this from the inside before. Then I saw the broader picture from an outside when I went to Washington, saw how people were reacting there from the U.S. government. They were treating us like some third country. Oh, you Ukrainians, you should not speak up. Like when I would give an advice, let's do this better. This could work out better. We could reform this body better if we get the old school guys together from the Soviet times, the new guys, which you like, put them in the same room, do the brainstorming, and let's develop our police or prosecutors body or cabinet ministers, our government better. And they would just push me away and say, oh, we don't want to hear what you're talking about. And a lot of Ukrainian government officials don't even speak up. They just agree to what the Americans are telling them. Whoever speaks up, the Americans just let them go. And that's what happened to me. I spoke up. I said, I don't want my country to be developed like this. I don't want my country to be falling apart. I don't want my country to be going into war, because I understood that something is being developed here to destroy my country from the inside, to weaken the government. I could not imagine ever that I thought there'd be some common sense in somebody's mind left not to bring the country to war with the superpower who has the most nuclear weapons in the world, that somebody in the government would stop this. But no, they cleaned everything up. They cleaned people like me up. I had a meeting with the U.S. Embassy in Kiev in 2016, and with Ken Toko, a political officer, for 2 hours we spoke, and they threatened me. They said, look, if you continue to talk about bad reforms, criticize what the U.S. government is doing here in Ukraine, we will politically destroy you. I said, why are you doing this? This is my country. I have one passport, a Ukrainian passport. I have nowhere to go. I want my country to be prosperous, not under your control. This is our national security interest. That's what they told me. That's what the U.S. government officials told to my face. This is our national security interest. And then from that point on, I started talking to different people more and more. And then I understood my country is being led to total destruction by war, or just by sucking everything out of the country, all the natural resources, all the what is left of it, and leave it as a Somalia right in the middle of Europe. I have nothing against Somalia, but this is just what a country like Somalia would be put in Central Europe, and that's what I was against, and I fought for it for the last 7 years. Unfortunately, we are here where we are today. I continue my fight from abroad of Ukraine. I still continue to talk about what we could do for peace and how we could stop this. And I think one of the things we could have stopped it was investigate Joe Biden. It was one of the cases where we could have shown how the deep state, with a simple case like Burisma and Hunter Biden, making money out of a country like Ukraine, what else are they doing there? What else is the deep state involved in there? And that would show the public, the US public, exactly what the government is involved in, not in their country, but abroad, how America is falling apart and these guys are making money. That's what democracy is about, right? This is how we should work it. And that's how I saw it. 2016, 2015, that's when I realized my country is going somewhere in the wrong direction. And I went out of this club of the deep state because I was in it. I said I had everything. I could have been anything I wanted, and I just didn't want to support this. I didn't want to have blood on my hands of my own people.
Let me ask you this. In looking right now, the NATO meeting in Vilnius is coming up in a couple weeks. And the talk that we've gotten for years is, oh, Ukraine's doing great. Russia's falling. They're out of weapons. They're fighting with shovels, blah, blah, blah. As I look at it and I see, Ukrainian city after city, things are getting blown up. Things are getting, the Ukrainian military, and I even use the word military, I guess, half-heartedly, because they're just taking people off the street. Are you really military if they grab you and give you 2 weeks training and put you in a uniform and call you a soldier? You're not a soldier. You're a kidnapping victim. But here's my question. I can look at it right now and see, man, this is terrible. They're just throwing their people, the Ukrainian country, they're just throwing their people out to be killed. It's terrible. But yet they're saying on television, we're doing great. We're keeping up the fight. What do you think about the current situation when Ukraine and going into NATO? They can't keep this up forever. I don't know if they know they can't or if they don't care. Anyway, the current situation as far as the battlefield and the, unthinkable losses that Ukraine has been taking for these years.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, dealing with the people in the deep state, they believe that they've so lost their mind. When God wants to punish you, He takes your mind out from you. That's what's happening to them. They lost their minds. They believe they can persuade with all this process. They believe they can make everybody believe that this war has been won by Zelensky regime, that this war has been won by the United States in Ukraine, and that this is a war for good. For this is a good war to fight against evil. They really believe that this is still, they can win this. Unfortunately, or in a good way, this is also good for normal people that one day this will be over because they believe it so well. Like Hitler believed he's going to win. Until the last moment, he went psychopath in his bunker and he thought he's going to win the war. And then when the Soviet tanks were right up his nose and he lost it. And that's how it's going to happen right now. I hope it's going to not lead to World War III, but definitely what is happening today, Ukrainian young men don't want to fight. Ukrainian soldiers out. If this was a war for Ukraine, if this was a war really for my country, I would be there also on the battlefield. I'm fighting my life. I had my life ruined by Western politics, but I still continue to fight. I would be there in Ukraine, but this is not Ukrainian war. This war was provoked, done by the NATO countries, the West, by promising Ukraine NATO and EU membership, and then going back and forth with all these promises, giving a candy and taking away, like with a child. This is what's happening today. So, and Ukrainians understand that also, but as I said, too much propaganda, too much information. People don't know where to take it from, and a lot of media sources are being blocked in Ukraine. And today, what is happening right now, the war is being lost by the Ukrainian regime, the Zelensky regime. It's not even the Ukrainian regime, it's the Zelensky regime, because Ukrainian people are good people. They're the devoted Christians. Their religion is being taken away from them. They're fighting for their lives right now. They're fighting to stay alive. But I think the Zelensky regime is going to fall, and it's going to fall because they believe they can win this, and they believe that they can win this because they're going to have Benjamin Franklins in their pocket. Where will they run? I think London and Washington will not be the case. They will not want them there. And I saw it from the beginning, and I had a lot of phone calls with friends in Washington said, this war is we should not start. You should not start this war. It's going to end. I had a lot of people who were very angry with me from high-ranking cabinets in Washington saying, "Oh no, we're going to win this. You should stand with your president." I said, "This is not the president which I want to stand with because he's not supporting my rights as a Ukrainian. He's supporting your rights, and for what cause?" And today we see over 350,000 casualties. I think around right now it's closer to 400,000 because the last month of so-called offensive or so-called attack from the Ukrainian army on the Russian front lines, Ukraine lost more than 15,000 men. It's less than a month. That's how many casualties they are. And the men who they're losing, they are taking them out of the streets. They have no professional background of military fighting. They have no professional background of fighting at all. People are being hiding, and the military police is just going and kidnapping people from their houses and beating the wives, coming to the houses and making them fight. And this is what we see today. For which cause? If you have an army, if you're a president of a country, you're a true leader, a government official, and you support your patriot. If your country does not have a fleet to fight, your country does not have air force to fight with, your country doesn't only have the army on the ground, you cannot fight a superpower. You cannot fight anything, because in the modern combat war, you don't fight in trenches. You fight using everything: artillery, air force, missiles, satellites, everything you have. And then you do not go to war. Understanding this, they thought Putin's going to fall. They thought Russia's going to stand up and destroy. That's what the cause of the war was: to use Ukraine as a bait to destroy a government in a sovereign country like Russia. And that's what they tried to do. That's what Washington and London tried to do, the deep state. And they didn't manage it. And Ukrainians are still dying. Then leave the country. Let our country develop, and let us see what we want for ourselves: a future with peace or with war. But they're still continuing the propaganda. They're still continuing to finance the war. They're still continuing to give them weapons. If they were so cautious for Ukrainians to save their lives, they would try to have peace talks. They would try to push both sides to sit in one table together with the United States, China, Russia, Africa, everybody who can make a peace, put them together and try to make a decision out. Not by joining Ukraine to NATO, but forming a new peace organizations. Because if we see the United Nations doesn't work, we have a group of countries which the United States controls them, and we have other countries who have no control or are in the Security Council but have no leverage because of other countries have a veto. And we have to form a new peace organization. And maybe the capital of that peace organization is going to be in Kiev, Ukraine. The World Peace Organization, we're going to have India, China, Russia, Egypt, those countries, Brazil in the Security Council, sit down together because the global shift has changed. And that's what we have to talk about: a new world with new countries, new economic growth. And that capital can be Ukraine. Why is nobody talking about even that idea? Only weapons, weapons, and weapons in a country where it has no fleet, no air force, no nothing, and the men are being thrown down to meat. That's what's happening. A meat grinder.
Let me ask you this. There's one of the things that I've said, and I want to get your thoughts on it. The United States went into Vietnam in the 60s and said, we must defeat the communists. And when the U.S. left, the communists were in charge. The U.S. went into Afghanistan and said, we must defeat the Taliban. And when they left, the Taliban were in charge. In the long run here, as I see it, Ukraine is very much culturally, politically, and economically has been connected to the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation. At some point, the U.S., when they put countries in this position, end up walking out and dropping them. You know, in the long-term Vietnam, at some point, the U.S., they were out of there. Afghanistan, at some point, things went south. They were out of there. And it is my belief that one of these days, the United States will look at Ukraine, and we may not be that far from it, and say, well, didn't get what we want, didn't work, the country's destroyed, everybody's broke, we're paying for all the bills, not anymore, we're gone, and leave Ukraine like they've done every other place in the United States. And at that point, the only place for Ukraine to turn will be next door to Russia for assistance. I may be wrong, but as a famous football coach we have, Bill Parcells, says, you are what your record says you are. The U.S.'s record says they go into countries, they overthrow the government, but when things go bad, they walk away and leave everybody and go somewhere else and start some mayhem. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think at some point the U.S. walks out of Ukraine and says, well, this didn't work, bye, and they're gone, didn't leave the Ukrainians holding the bag? Or does Poland say they want to come in? Well, they're just about out of ammunition. What happens anyway?
Yeah, U.S. has a record of doing that. Ukraine does have a record of being part of the Slavic world where we are part of with Belarus, with Russia. We have more in common than anybody else. We have the same religion. We have Orthodoxy, which has a 1,000-year history. That's the core. We have the same saints. We have the same holidays, which today Zelensky is trying to catalyze.
Is that why they're closing down the churches and locking up?
Yeah, I'm in contact with the head of the CPGB-ML, and I understand what's happening there on the ground. We are on the verge of being all the saints and all the icons being sent out to the West, to France, to other countries, which is just a terrible situation if that happens. The Nazis did that. They tried to do that. They did that, and they failed. We saw how they ended. So today, Ukraine has a large connection, a huge connection to Russia. We're not Russians, we are Ukrainians, but we are connected, interconnected historically with the Kiev Rus, with the forming of Ukraine. Unfortunately, the last 30 years, Ukraine was not being taught, and the politics in Ukraine was not being put as a country of peace and the motherland of Russia. It was being put as a country that hated Russia from the beginning, right from the beginning, even though we are the same. We had the founder of Moscow was the son of our king from the Kiev Rus. So we are all one family. And that's 1,000-year history. Our patriarch 1,000 years ago went to Moscow. That's where he sits. We cannot say the Pope has to be in Washington because he's in the Vatican, that's bad. Nobody says that, right? Even though there's a lot of questions maybe to the church everywhere in the world. But our Pope is in Moscow. That's how the history is. And that's how we have to deal with it. And we have a lot in common. Our people are the same. Even look how the houses are built. You look how the culture, the food, everything else is interconnected. Families are interconnected, not only during the Soviet times, but throughout hundreds of years and thousands of years. So today, what happened in America sees the fall of the Soviet Union. They see opportunity to destroy Russia further. They couldn't do that at that time. They had Yeltsin, who was basically an alcoholic trying to rule Russia, and they were trying to form their own governments in countries like Ukraine. They couldn't do that after the Orange Revolution, so they did it after the coup in 2014, and they basically put a Slavic country. What Brzezinski wrote in the 80s, how to destroy Russia is to have two Slavic countries fight, to spill blood. That's U.S. policy. It's being taught in university. It's not some secret document. It's not some conspiracy. This is the logic of the U.S. government and the deep state. Not the whole U.S. government, because a lot of you Americans are good people. I know that, and I live there, and it's 4th of July today, so happy 4th of July to everybody. It's a great holiday, but the deep state is ruining not only the United States, it's ruining countries around the world. And it's going to leave Ukraine one day or another, like it's left Afghanistan. As soon as the situation in Taiwan hits the fan, that's how the U.S. cannot go two ways. You cannot fight two wars. That's the problem with the U.S. policy today. And I know that from the people who are working on the inside. And what I know also, that what's going to happen, and take my word for this, they're going to blame Zelensky for losing the war. Zelensky, that's why I said he's not going to be able to leave to London and to Washington. I don't know where he's going to go. He's going to be in Ukraine, and he's going to face trial for what he did to Ukraine and Ukrainians. But everybody's going to blame him in the West. All the media, everybody's going to go against him because they're going to the deep state is going to try to cover up for what they did in Ukraine and blame people like the Ukrainian government. So Ukraine will have to go with the new government. Will have to go to its neighbors: Belarus, Russia, Hungary, Georgia, everybody around, to rebuild their country, because nobody's going to give us money. Nobody's going to give failed country loans. We already are in depth of foreign loans. The money which is given to Ukraine today is not free money. It's all loans which we have to return. And I think the West will have to understand, if they would want to return that money, they'll have to talk to any government in Ukraine that was going to be the new government. If the new government of Ukraine would want to have peace with Russia, Belarus, and countries around us, not want to have fight war, they would have to recognize the government, because if they would not recognize the government, they will not be able to get their money back. The $200 billion which the West and the US and the European Union gave to Ukraine, they'll want it back. So they'll have to recognize the new government, talk to the new government, and negotiate what they can return. And Ukraine, working together with countries like Brazil, China, Russia, will form and rebuild itself. and we will have to face the consequences of what the U.S. did to us and what was done throughout the last 30 years in Ukraine.
That's something I wanted to ask you. You know, since, as you said, you work with the Prosecutor General's office, you work with Blue Star Strategies, you're very familiar with Hunter. What are your thoughts about Joe Biden saying that he didn't know what Hunter was going on? He had no part of it. He wasn't making money off of it. He didn't help Hunter get a job or anything. What are your thoughts on that?
As I said at the beginning, he knew everything what was going on. That was Amos and Blue Star's role, to tell him, describe to him in simple words what were the problems with Burisma, how to solve them, how to make money, because he was the one who was involved in meetings. He was the one who would give a green light to sell off very expensive gas developing equipment to Burisma, which was under criminal cases in Ukraine. And the owner of Burisma had to flee in Ukraine, could not buy that equipment from the United States. So a green light would have to be given off from Summer Height at the top, not only on Hunter Biden's level. He was there just being his father's son. That's it.
So you're saying that Joe Biden was actually involved in policy to benefit the company, that he just didn't just know what happened was going on with Burisma, but he was actually involved in making policy and political decisions in Ukraine to benefit the company that hired his son.
Of course, not only to benefit, but to close criminal cases against the company with firing the prosecutor, also helping process and lobby buying U.S. equipment on gas development and to sell it to Burisma. One of the biggest gas development drills was bought from U.S. Texas when Joe Biden was the vice president of the United States, and being sold to Burisma directly, and he was involved in that process. Blue Star, before Hunter went on the board of directors, did 2 reports. It said one legit, one unlegit. One with nice, Burisma as a nice company, nothing, no problems. We can have just PR and we can solve their problems. That's what they put out to the public. And the unlegit one, the black one, they showed what were the real problems in Burisma, how to make more money out of Burisma, how to help to make more money out of Burisma, what problems were to be solved, and where can U.S. and not only the United States, but what Joe Biden and his family benefit from. And that's where Blue Star and Amos Hochstein, the middleman, came in describing them, because I think Joe Biden doesn't have no idea what gas business, like in depth. Gas.
And that's what he brought Amos Hochstein. You know, it's interesting because Amos Hochstein, look, as I said, when I first heard of him was when he started working for Joe Biden to stop Nord Stream 2. And that's when I found out that he was working with the Obama administration. And then when the Obama administration overthrew the government of Ukraine, he went to Naftogaz. He did the same thing that Hunter Biden did. He went on the board of a company in Ukraine immediately and made a fortune doing that. And but you're telling me that Amos Hochstein was Joe Biden's guy.
Yeah,
that he was Biden's guy to work, because I do know he has a background in that gas stuff. So he would basically, it sounds to me like Biden brought him in to Ukraine to handle all the Burisma and all of this kinds of basically a gas related corruption. Yeah.
First of all, when Hunter was joining the board of members of Burisma, Amos Hochstein was working in the State Department as an energy guy there.
Right.
Head of energy department. That's how he got directly involved into this Burisma stuff. That's the reports which Blue Star provided went through him and a table of the vice president of the United States. They legalized it through a government official like the State Department and Amos Hochstein to build their business in the future. That's how it worked, from how I was directly told by the owners of Blue Star Strategies how they did it. And unfortunately, nobody wants to hear this in the United States. The U.S. Congress doesn't have the guts to lift the sanctions of me, to have me testify in front of Congress and say, I can talk about this openly and testify. Everything I said before on DNC, Ukraine, Burisma, Blue Star Strategies, it all checked out, verified. If I told a lie, I would not be sanctioned. I would be in federal prison in the United States. But they sanctioned me because they made up a case, made me a Russian spy or Russian agent or whatever they said I was, and put it and signed off those documents. And that's how to block me from testifying in the United States. And unfortunately, that's how it has to be. It has to happen today. The truth has to come out. The U.S. Congress, Congressman Comer, Congressman Jim Jordan, have to have the guts to talk to people like me, because there's other whistleblowers who want to talk, but they're afraid. They see what happened to Telizhenko. They see how people went after a person like me, like Telizhenko, which had to flee, fight for my life, and I almost got killed. I cannot get a job right now because I'm under sanctions. I cannot get a job anywhere. I cannot open up a bank account, and have to survive on what I have to survive on, having side jobs. But they have to get the guts to lift the sanctions off me, to save people like me, because there's other whistleblowers who will come out and see that, oh, the whistleblowers are being protected. The people like Telizhenko are being protected. We want to come out and tell the truth and bring the puzzles together, because I only know a part of it. I don't know everything. I know a small part of it, which I can bring this puzzle together and have the bigger picture for the U.S. authorities to do their proper job and Congress to do their proper job. And that's what has to be heard today. Unfortunately, they couldn't. They had people like Romney, a senator, come up and block a subpoena on a person like Telizhenko. I'm a small Ukrainian, a former government official, as the liberal media wrote about me, CNN. Oh, he's not even a diplomat. That's what they called me. He's not even a government official. He's some lowlife. Why would they sanction falsely a person like me? Why would they go after me? Why would CNN, Washington Post, everybody write about me for years? And because if I am nobody, because I was hitting the truth, and the truth has to come out into the U.S. public, not only on even Blue Star and Amos Holstein, but also on Ukraine, what is happening today to my country to stop the war.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was this. During the 2016 election, there was a lot. There was the infamous investigation into Donald Trump, Paul, and a lot of that ran through Ukraine, the Paul Manafort, etc. And it seems to me, the FBI, Coleman, they opened an office in Ukraine. It seems to me that there was a lot of U.S. intelligence work related to interference between the U.S. intelligence agencies and the Democratic Party, that there was a lot of interference in the 2016 election that was running through or coming out of Ukraine. I do know that, during that period, you were involved with the U.S. Embassy. You were involved with a number of people. Can you tell us if that is so? And if so, what do you know about it?
Yeah, that is so. I was one of the first whistleblowers on the Ukraine DNC election interference when the Ukrainian embassy was involved in working together with the Democratic National Committee and Alexander Chalupa, on which I testified not only publicly in the U.S. media, which the political article by Ken Vogel, but I also testified to the Federal Election Commission, where I was subpoenaed in 2019, and I testified in Washington, D.C. under oath to them on what happened. They closed the case after I got sanctioned, the head of the Federal Election Commission, just because I got sanctioned, not even on this case. It was a separate case on the Hunter Biden story I got sanctioned for, but they still closed the case because they didn't want to continue to process it, because it would lead to somebody going to prison from the Democratic Committee. And it was there. The election interference, I got orders from that's when I resigned from the Ukrainian embassy in Washington. And I got direct orders from to meet with the Democratic National Committee officials like Chalupa. I got direct orders to work with them and give them dirt on President Donald Trump and Paul Manafort. That's what they asked for me. Chalupa asked for dirt during the meeting which I had with her, and she represented herself as a Democratic National Committee representative, and she even confirmed that in the article, which after she denied, not confirming that. And I can tell you that I got orders to look into George Papadopoulos and Carter Page weeks before their stories hit the news. And that was interesting for me. And before I resigned, I did provide the information on those investigations to my superiors at the embassy, to the ambassador, which he directly ordered that to me. And unfortunately, we saw what happened afterwards to these people. And I testified that everything. And I have confirmation emails which I provided to my superiors at the embassy, that I sent information on Carter Page and Papadopoulos weeks before it happened in May of 2016. And May 13th, to be exact, I had an interview a couple of weeks ago, which I remember you having the exact date you're talking about. That's the story. So this is all there. It all happened. Ukraine was involved. Ukraine was there, but unfortunately, when I came out, and that's when I came out, and I left my good position. I could have stayed at the embassy working there for 10 years, being there still, or being somewhere higher up. But I did not want to get involved. I didn't want to have my country get involved in this dirt. And as soon as I came out, they started to destroy my life. And as I said, I was working for Blue Star for a year, but then as soon as I came out with the article on in Politico, they fired me almost a couple months right afterwards. They didn't continue my contract. And because they were afraid, I was telling the truth. And this was there. Ukraine was used from the beginning. Ukraine was used for the last 30 years, and the last 9 years exactly, Ukraine was used very hard to go in U.S. politics and foreign politics as a dirty rag. My country, a country where people are born, was used as a dirty rag to do dirty work. And this was, I didn't want this to happen. They call me a Russian spy just because I talk about this. They are the spies. They
Let
are
me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You know, they called you a Russian spy. They sanctioned you. What was this about? You're a Russian spy. I mean, did they ever present anything to you? Did they ever come to you and say, we think you're a Russian spy? What's this business? Because it's like Konstantin Kilimnik. I still see that he was a Russian. You know, they're like, yes, Paul Manafort gave stuff to Konstantin Kilimnik, who was working with the FSB or GRU or whoever, anyone who says something that they don't like or is involved in any kind of issue, they just say, or anytime it's convenient, that person is a Russian spy or works for the Russians. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's what they used the tactics during the Soviet Union, which the Soviet Union used to destroy people. Oh, you're a British agent, you're a British spy, and then they would destroy your life. It all started in the news. It starts in the news. I was laughing at this because I knew that I was not a Russian spy. I had access 5 times to the White House officially. Officially, I was verified by the U.S. government to go into the White House and have meetings with the advisors to the President of the United States starting in 2013. If I ever was a Russian spy, it would be popped up. And this is also in the Senator Johnson, Senator Grass's report from 2020. They're asking questions. Why did you work with this person for years? Blue Star Strategies, a Democratic lobby firm, Obama White House officials, meeting with Telizhenko for years. Not just the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, but the White House being access. Why did you give this guy access? And if he's so bad right now because he came out against you, that's the question. I came out against them, and that's why they have the power to use all what they have to go against people like me. That's why I'm saying, U.S. Congress has to have the guts to come up and save people like me, to fight for people like me, so other whistleblowers can come out and tell the truth, because they will see that they're going to be fought for, not going to be destroyed and thrown under the bus. And I can tell you that, like Manafort mentioned me in his book, which came out this year, in the White House meeting about NABU and him, where this whole story started to pop up on Ukraine interference. And I was there. I was in those meetings. And I'm not a Russian spy. I said, if I was a Russian spy, I probably would be approached by U.S. officials and talked to. But I worked with the FBI counterintelligence unit from New York for 9 months. And from 2019 till 2020, I was meeting with them almost every month for 6 to 9 hours in hotel rooms, trying to have them understand what the Burisma case was about. And if I was a spy, I would be arrested by the counterintelligence of the FBI. But I wasn't. I was being listened to. And they were actually looking into this case. But why they stopped to meet with me? They just stopped meeting with me one day because they said the agents who brought that information to the top, because the deal was they offered me to work for them officially. I denied. I said, I'm going to do it as a good citizen, as out of goodwill. And my name would never be used in those reports. Now I can talk about it, because before I could not talk about this. But because they threw me all under the bus, I can tell the truth right now on anything. They went up to the top, to the Washington, and told that we have information on Biden. This guy was telling us, this whistleblower was telling us. And they got pulled off the case because it went over their pay grade. That's how I was told. They had to leave me and drop the case That's what happened in 2019, 2020. And if I was a spy, the counterintelligence unit of the FBI would tear me apart. The Federal Election Commission would never subpoena me, and I would never testify. The Homeland Security Committee by Senator Johnson, the Finance Committee by Senator Grassley, would never use my testimony out of 87 pages, 29 pages of my testimony and my information from my emails and my communication with Blue Star in their report, in the Senate report. This is all just deep state propaganda, which are trying to go against me. People in the deep state are very powerful. That's why they're using things like sanctions to go against people like me, because there's no court. And sanctions, you cannot go in front of a grand jury and testify and say, oh, I have the rights, I have evidence. No, they just sanctioned you. You cannot even go, it's a political decision.
I did want to ask you, I know I said one more thing, but one more thing. NABU, the FBI's so-called Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine. I've often brought it up. It's strange. There was a point in my life, I retired from law enforcement. I was a law enforcement official in Maryland, and I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And after I worked with the JTTF, people asked me my opinion, and I said, it's an intelligence agency masquerading as a law enforcement agency. What the hell are they doing in Ukraine? The FBI is supposed to be handling in the United States kidnappings, bank robberies, terrorism in the United States. The United States overthrows the government of Ukraine, and the FBI opens an anti-corruption bureau in Ukraine. It sounds to me like it was in fact, a corruption bureau in Ukraine. What can you tell me about NABU? And I also understand they were involved in going after Manafort and on and on. NABU, what do we know?
Yeah, I can talk about NABU a lot. I saw it when it was being formed. I knew the head of NABU, Artem Sitnik, pretty well. He would tell me directly, I want to be a U.S. agent. I'm ready to work for the U.S. government as long as they give me power. That's what Artem Sitnik, the head of NABU, told me directly to me while we were sitting there and drinking. And I was in contact with all these people for years and years. I was in the meeting with the head of NABU in the White House when the Paul Manafort stuff got mentioned. The name Paul Manafort was never mentioned in that White House meeting. That's where they mentioned a U.S. citizen working for the former government of Yanukovych to talk about the Ukrainian government officials and the Ukrainian prosecutor's office and NABU would bring any information to the U.S. government about any U.S. officials working with the Yanukovych government, which was overthrown by the U.S. That's what it was mentioned. That's what the first start, and Paul Manafort mentions that in his book with my involvement in it. And that was also Fox News talked about it, Laura Ingraham about this, and I was there, and I heard what they were talking. Biden's national security people. And Eric Sherman-Allen was in that meeting with Artem Sitnik, the head of NABU, talking about Paul Manafort and how to basically start an investigation into people like Paul Manafort to destroy the Trump campaign in the future. So that's how it all started. And NABU, they discussed during the White House meeting also how to give illegal equipment to NABU to do tappings into Ukrainian government phones, offices. Why I say illegally? Because NABU at that time did not have a legal procedure onto doing tapping into government official phones, offices, etc. Only the Secret Service of Ukraine and the police had the legal possibility to do that by the law. But it didn't stop the U.S. government at that time, and the FBI, the FBI, Department of Justice, brought the head of NABU, Sitnik, to the White House meeting. They were responsible for him, for his visit there. They were overseeing him. They were controlling him because he would report directly to him. I, as a Ukrainian government official, was blocked to even attend a lot of meetings where they were attending because they understood who I was. I only attended the White House meeting a couple of others at the FBI. But you're correct. An FBI, an internal body within the United States, which by the law cannot go and do foreign investigations or foreign intelligence work, only the Central Intelligence Agency can do that, went and formed a body in Ukraine like NABU, tapped the phones and offices of the president of Ukraine, the high-ranking government officials, to use it in their own work, to use them as puppets, or destroy people who would not collaborate with them and not do what they would want to do. So they would use NABU as a body to go against corruption but put in their own corruption in their bodies and to use those people to do their dirty work in Ukraine. And the outcome we see war today. So to have those people do whatever they wanted them to do and obey what the U.S. Embassy, the FBI, the U.S. government, the deep state would tell them to do.
It sounds less, but it does sound to me like there's from what you're saying that people in the Obama administration and the Biden people were in fact working directly in Ukraine. Members of the Obama administration were actively working to interfere with the 2016 election, actively working to go after Trump's people, actively working to go after Paul Manafort, actively working to basically thwart the Trump campaign from Ukraine. And it sounds to me like that's why when what's his name from New York, Giuliani, when he went there and started looking into that, when you started talking about that, it seems to me they were afraid that too much was coming out and they had to go after Giuliani and you and basically shut your mouths.
Yeah, that's what happened. They went after Rudy Giuliani. I was part of Giuliani's team helping him on the documents he received in Ukraine. I testified to Giuliani as a lawyer of the President of the United States on what I saw also. Was what I testified to the FEC, to the Senate. I also testified to Rudy Giuliani and gave information to him. And they were afraid. They're afraid that the truth will come out. The truth, the U.S. public would hear the truth before the presidential elections of 2020, and they would vote in a different president, and they would not be able, the deep state would not be able to start a war. The deep state would not be able to continue to control countries like Ukraine, because we know that why I also was in favor of President Trump, because I understood that this person would not interfere in our policy. And when I worked with Rudy Giuliani and when I worked in his team during that process, that's what the Treasury Department put me in, that they put me in as a Russian agent because I allegedly, they say, introduced Giuliani to Derkach, even though I don't know Derkach, and there are witnesses in the Congress today that said I never introduced Giuliani to Derkach, I'm not involved with Derkach, etc., etc. But that's how they try to destroy us. They try to destroy us by labeling us Russian agents or using Russian information, etc., because they were afraid of the truth. They were afraid that we would come in and this truth would come out, and some Ukrainian would testify in Congress, and all lies would just explode in their face, like Vindman, all these people who testified. They testified in Congress against me, saying that I'm not a legit witness, even though I never knew people like Vindman. I never even met with these people. How could he testify who I am and who I'm not? That's how deep they were afraid of the truth coming out. And because if we were not Giuliani or me or other people, we're not just telling lies or conspiracy theories. Oh, they'll just say, these people we should put them in the nut house. Nobody's going to listen to them. It doesn't make sense. And that's it. This is just some blabber. But no, I was put on a blacklist on Fox News. I was put on a lot of blacklists on other news agencies because they were afraid that I was going to come out and talk about this, or Giuliani would come out and talk about this. I was blocked. I was destroyed, and that's it. So the question is, if you would destroy somebody, go this far to lie about him, then there's something to hide. And that's why I'm still fighting. I'm still fighting for the truth to come out, because if this truth comes out, it could stop a war. In today, what could stop World War III. Maybe a small part, not everything, but a small part could lead to the stoppage of World War III. That's why I'm still fighting today to have it being heard in the U.S., because only the U.S., if it sits down with Russia, can stop this war. Only if the U.S. decides to stop to send weapons to Ukraine, to the Zelensky regime, which is killing its own people, and going after people like me, then this war will end. Then we would be able to sit down on a table and negotiate a peace deal, which would save my Ukraine to be a country which we can rebuild in the future.
Certainly, let's hope that happens soon. And I certainly thank you for your bravery, and I thank you for your hard
Thank you.
work. And we'll stay in touch. And we are on YouTube. We're also on Rockfin. I've also got my stuff up on Odyssey and Twitch. So we've got a couple of free speech platforms, particularly Rockfin, but Odyssey also. So everyone feel free to go to any of the platforms to check this out. Thank you very much, Andrii, and let's stay in touch. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Gerald. Happy 4th of July. All the best to you guys.
All right. Thank you. Andrii Telizhenko. I thought that was great. I followed a lot of those stories for a long time. And, I hope there wasn't a lot of insider talk. I would advise people to look at it, listen to this. There's a lot of really good information there. And of course, as you know, if you say something that goes against the mainstream narrative, if you say something that goes against the deep state narrative, they're going to call you every name in the book, every kind of Russian spy, Russian bot. And I saw an interesting article today where they mentioned RFK Jr. and other people, and they couldn't do anything else. So they just said, what they're saying aligns with Kremlin propaganda. That's kind of like Garland, the Russians saying it's dark outside at midnight, and me saying, well, yeah, it is dark outside at midnight, and people saying, well, you should ignore Garland. He said it's dark outside at midnight, but that's aligned with what Putin said. It doesn't matter with who it aligns with. Either it's true or false. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing people attacked for making true statements that are easily verifiable simply because they do not align with the mainstream narrative, and they put at risk some of these crooks and criminals in the neoliberal gangster class. Thanks to everybody. Don't forget, all the ways the Patreon and PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee are available for anyone who is able to support the channel. Make sure you become a member at Rockfin, ROKFIN.com/Garland Nixon. Costs absolutely nothing to be a member, and it's a free speech platform. You never know. For all I know, they might get mad at Andrii. I mean, hey, he's letting people know that Joe Biden was involved in all kind of chicanery. So you never know. I have had some of my videos tossed off YouTube. I've been threatened over some of my videos by YouTube. But this one is also available at rockfin.com/Garland Nixon, which is a free speech channel. Also, you never know, they may toss me off of YouTube on any given day. So make sure you go over to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon and become a member. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. And I thank you very much, Andrii. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Peace. I'm out.